What's cracking, everyone? My name is Eric, and today we are taking a look at for loops. So a few videos ago, we took at the three types of loops we have in Roblox Lua or Lua. As we know it here in scripting inside Roblox Studio, we talked about the repeat and the while loop, and then we skipped the for loop for another video because it's too complicated to cover in the same video. So here we are with it with a separate video for the for loop. So before we get cracking, let's actually look at last video's challenge. And although it's only 7 lines of code, as you can see right here, it's still a bit complicated. So I thought you guys needed to use modulars. And normally these challenges are fairly easy, where as long as you followed along the video nicely and understood most of it, then you would be able to complete the challenge. And that's all nice and good that you get the knowledge from the video, but I think it's also important that you learn about the problem solving of this. So in this case, I told you how modulus works. You hopefully already knew how the if statements work, but it's still hard to create this script. So basically, last video's challenge was to create an if statement that can detect if a number is even or not. And that's so hard. You have all the knowledge you need, but it just still teaches. It's still hard enough that it teaches you that problem solving part about scripting, which I think is essential. So hopefully from now on, it's going to be a bit harder. Maybe you managed to create, complete the challenge. Maybe you didn't. But yeah, let's talk about it briefly. So I quickly declare a variable named number, and then whatever number I choose. Now, the thing is that the way modulus works, we talked about that last time, but it also means that if you take something and operate it with the modulus operator with another number that is sorry, let's say we have number 1 and number 2. You say number 1 modulus number 2. If number 1 is divisible fully by number 2, that means that the modulus will equal to 0. So that is the first thing we need to know. The second thing we need to know is that all even numbers can be divided by 2. So this means that if something if something modulus 2 will equal to 0, meaning that it is divisible by 0, it is even. So yeah, that's pretty much everything there is to it. So it takes says number modulo 2, and then if that is equal to 0, that means the number is divisible by 2, and thus the number is even. So it prints the number is even. However, if that's not the case, if modulo is 1 or something else, it should print the number is odd. So let's test it out. My number right here is 9. So hopefully it should say the number is odd. And if I had something like 8, 10, or 12, it should print the number is even. But yeah, that's quite a lot of talking for today's challenge. We'll get started just after this. So yeah, if I spawn in, as you can see here, it says the number is odd. Beautiful. So we just wait for it to load in so we can stop it again, and then we'll proceed with today's video. So, as I said, today we'll talk about the for loop. So, we've looked at the while and repeat loop. The for loop is similar to the repeat and while loop, the third type of loop that we have in the studio. However, the for loops, reiterate something a given amount of times. So, a while loop just does it while a certain thing is true. However, you don't really have any idea for how many times it does it. The for loop, however, with the for loop, you can actually count how many times you do it. You can set it to do it a specific amount of times. So let's start typing it. So the for loop, as always, it has the declaration, which is for. Then it has the condition, which is quite long in this case, which is what makes it so hard. Then the start of the scope, which is do, and the end of the scope, which is end. Pretty similar to what we've covered before. So let's look at the condition. Now this consists of 3 parts. So basically the for loop works in the way that it's a counter. So it starts, you give it a certain variable, and then it counts up from that variable to a certain point. And for every time it counts up, it does something. So let's just start from the basics here. So I'm gonna say for, and then I'm gonna say I equals 1. So this is the variable. This is the counter variable, and I'll talk about I'll talk in a bit about why we almost always use I. So you can name once again, this is a variable. You can name this anything you want. You can name it counter. You can name it count. I mean, we almost always in scripting you almost always use I, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, name it whatever. This is going to be the count. So then we want to set how long it's going to count. Let's say we want to count it until 5. So so it will count 1 up at a time until it reaches 5. And the last thing, which isn't actually necessary, but I'm going to type it out, is how much we want it to count up at a time. So as I said, we wanted to count 1 up at a time, so we're going to say 1, do. So now we have this. So it's going to start at the 1, and then it's going to run this. Then it's going to go. Then it's going to go back, and except this time it counts 1 up, as we said here. So now it's at 2, and it does it again, and it keeps counting up like that for every time. Every time it's completed a loop, it counts 1 up until it reaches 5. Now once it's reached 5, which we've said is its endpoint, it does one final loop and then stops. So this is actually so this means that we can actually decide how many times we want it to count. So let's do 5. So as I just said, this will count to 1, do a loop, then go 1 up and go to 2, do a loop, and so on like that until it reaches 5, and then does one more loop. One final loop also. So let's just say print hello. So we should see that this happens 5 times. And as always, per tradition on this channel, I've forgotten to open the output console. But as always, it doesn't really matter that much. I'm just going to open it after. So we should see that it prints hello 5 times. Now if we just wait for it to load in here, and then we open up the output console, then we should see that it has printed hello 5 times. And you can imagine that if we change the 5 out with a 10, then you get the same result. It would print it 10 times. Now another thing is because the counter is a variable, you can actually use this variable inside the loop. So I can say print I. So it will know what this is because this I references this I variable. So the variable that you create here can actually be used inside the scope. So now we should actually actually, as a little small challenge, I usually don't do this, but yeah, before we proceed, what do you think will happen now? Just pause the video and take and think a bit about what this output should give us. Got it? All right. Let's start testing the world and see what happens. Hopefully you got it right. Maybe you didn't even pause. Maybe you get it wrong. No idea. Let's take a look. So remember, I goes 1 up every time, and now we've set it so that each time it prints the I variable. So we should see that we see every count of I, meaning that it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there you can see that I actually goes 1 up at a time. Now, so now we've talked about the destination here and the fact that we can, condition here, and the fact that we can use it inside the scope. We've also, yeah, you can, once again, you can change the starting variable. You probably know what that will do. But yeah, that basically means if I change this to 2, it would obviously start at 2 and go 1 up. The third and last thing we can change is its increment. So I can actually change this to be 2. So now it should start at 1, and then it should count 2 up and 2 up again. So it should go 1, 3, 5 because we're counting 2 up at a time this time. Now we just wait for it to load in once again, and as you can see, it says 1, 3, 5. Now the last thing I want to show you is how we can actually shorten this down. As you've seen before, we can shorten pretty much everything down before I show it. But yeah, so per standard, it will actually count 1 up at a time, meaning that we don't even need to put an increment. If you want to count up 1 at a time, then you can just leave this blank. It will automatically count 1 up at a time. So now we'll start at 1, go to 5, and because you haven't declared the increment, then we'll just count 1 up at a time. And you can also do negative numbers. You can make it count down. Yeah. So let's say you start at 5 and you go down. Let me just go down here, and then you count down to 1. So now you start at 5 and go to 1, and you count 1 down at a time. You can also do that, as you'll see right here. So, as you can see, when it's 1 in here, it should now print 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, because we start at 5, end at 1, and it counts 1 down at a time. And when we load in here, you'll see that it doesn't work. Flip. Now you can see that it prints 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That was a bit embarrassing. I forgot to actually print the I value. But as you can see, it now counts the other way because we start at 5 and end at 1. So I think that's actually pretty much it for the for loop. Next video we'll talk about functions, and then you're honestly then you're actually progressing pretty nicely. Like if you've understood everything, or not just everything, most of what I'm saying so far, you're already on a good path ahead. Soon we will talk about actually 3D programming, like working with the actual game instead of this boring text stuff. But yeah. As a last challenge for next video, remember I do this every video, with some exceptions, but let's not talk about that. Once again, I'm gonna do it a bit harder again. So now you have to find out if a number is a prime number or not. So pretty similar to the challenge for today's video. The challenge for next video is not to find if it's an even number, but to find out if it's a prime number. So for those that don't know, a prime number is a number that can only be divided by itself or 1. So let's take a look at 7. It can be divided by 1, and it can be divided by itself, which is 7. But besides that, it can't be divided with anything else besides itself and 1. So that means that it's a prime number, unlike, let's say, 12. So obviously it can be divided by itself, which is 12 and 1. But besides that, it can also be divided by 2, 3, 4, and 6. So 12 is not a prime number. So you'll have to use the for loop, of course, but you also have to use the if statements from last video and a bit of the modulus operator magic stuff. So it's pretty hard, but yeah, give it a shot at least if you think you can do it. So with that done, I think that's pretty much everything for today's video. That was the challenge, that was the for loop. Hopefully you understood everything. As always, feel free to leave any questions down in the comments below. If you have any questions, I'll try my best to answer them. But yeah. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have the next video. But until then, peace out.